Chapter 5 Brood Parasites. Enos spent most of her time alone in the headquarters, avoiding the top heroes at all costs. Instead of seeking out Nathan or anyone else to give her answers, she busied herself with other little assignments. Namely, she'd been overlooking some of the training classes, watching how the younger vigilantes and upcoming heroes worked together. It was as tense as she had expected it, watching as the teachers awkwardly instructed them through the obvious split in the group. Enos only observed, holding her tongue as the hero taught the teens mediocre skills at best. Like usual, she kept her face schooled of any expression, staring back at the students who would glance her way. "I've heard rumors that Roth wants to talk to you about your contract," a voice said from behind her. Jumping slightly, she was met with the neutral face of Clyde Burton. She huffed out a sigh, crossing her arms as she turned her attention back to the class. "Surprised he didn't use the new laws to kick you out." "I'm not," she said simply. Clyde shuffled closer, readjusting his grip on the broom that he was holding. "Do you think they're making plans for what to do with you?" he asked. They both knew that he meant, "Are they planning to kill you?" Enos felt cold, realizing that she couldn't answer it solidly. There was no doubt that the new laws were another step closer to the Federation erasing vigilantes, but never crossed her mind what that would mean for Enos now. "In all of your research about the Federation's corruption, have you found any more bird files like Keegan's?" she asked instead, turning to face him head-on. Clyde paused for a moment, confused, but considering her question. "I haven't exactly had the time to search their database for every type of bird in hopes that there's a secret file," he shot back with a chuckle. Enos couldn't help but huff out one of her own laughs despite the lack of humor. Before she could reply, she could hear light footsteps walking towards the training room at a quick pace with purpose. Her eyes immediately snapped to the new person entering, locking eyes with Kaz Rebe. The kid was sporting a new burn scar on his ear, easily mirroring the one that Enos had on her wrist. He broke his gaze to look out onto the training mat, offering the tiniest nod to Bennett, who had won his sparring match. Kaz made quick work of walking up to where Enos and Clyde stood on the sidelines, standing in front of them. "Calfaction is asking for you to meet him in his office," he said coolly, looking at Enos. "You didn't hear it from me, but it sounds like you're going on a new assignment." "Noted," Enos replied with a snort. She nodded in farewell to Clyde, a silent promise that they'd continue their conversation later, and turned towards the younger vigilante to lead the way. The two of them walked in silence for a while until they entered the elevator, pushing their respective button to the floor of Roth's office. "I've mentioned a parakeet," Kaz murmured out as the elevator rose. It took a moment for Enos to understand what he was talking about, and then it clicked when she turned to face him sharply. "Did they tell you directly, or is this something you overheard?" she asked, equally as quiet. She knew what average speaking voices felt like with heightened hearing like Kaz also had, who shot her a grateful smile at her volume. "It was something Knight she'd brought up to Calfaction once a few months back," he started. "It sounded like a code name for someone, but I can't confirm that. After this, I want you to find Clyde, the janitor, and tell him what you just told me," Enos commanded in a calm voice. "I want you to tell him that I have also heard about a Honeyguide file." Kaz momentarily looked confused, but nodded slowly after a moment. She was thankful he didn't ask anything else, not sure how she'd summarize the massive threat of vigilantes were facing. He inhaled deeply, composing himself as the door slid open to reveal their desired floor. As the duo made their way towards Roth's office, Enos couldn't help but study the younger vigilante. While he physically didn't look anything like Enos, she couldn't help but see the similarities between them. She too was once some scrawny kid from the moors, looking to make a difference that the heroes couldn't. The way Kaz carried himself, lightly but always scanning the room, was an old habit that she found hard to shake even into adulthood. His eyes, cold, reminded her of the haunted moors that he too grew up in. "Good luck," he offered once they reached the office door. "Stay safe," she returned with a gentle pat on his shoulder. She watched him slip back into the elevator, hopefully heading back down to where Clyde was to tell him about the parakeet file. Knocking on the door, Enos entered Roth's office with caution. Although he wasn't alone inside, sitting across from his desk sat Nathan, who didn't even look up as she walked in, too lost in thought. "There's a new assignment I want you two to handle," Roth said in lieu of greeting. Enos sat down next to Nathan, trying not to look over at him as she grabbed the file folder from the hero. Scanning the pages, her eyes locked onto a grainy CCTV footage of a hooded figure. "I figured you would have been done using me in the public," Ina shot back. "We won't want the Federation to face yet another scandal by working with a vigilante." She could feel the light pull of Nathan's presence in her mind, a gentle tug asking her to back off for now. The sensation surprised her briefly, almost forgetting about the connection since it had been so long since they acknowledged it. While she wanted to relent and listen to him, she found that she had no reason to at that moment. She waited for the top hero's response, itching for a fight. "As far as the public is concerned, you're cooperating with the Federation, meaning you're working with a license, meaning it's perfectly legal," Roth retorted. The "for now" went unspoken as he turned his attention to his copy of the file. "This is a new vigilante," Nathan murmured quietly. It took all of the strength that Enos possessed to not look over at him. "He goes by the name of Foxglove, a nature-track vigilante that has been catching our attention for the past week," Roth introduced, sifting through the file to find a police report that had been filed on the vigilante. "He's been known for about a month now, but he's caused enough damage in that short amount of time." It was in sick realization that Enos realized what they were asking of her. "So this is the first victim of the new vigilante laws," she mused aloud, staring at the picture. She wouldn't have been surprised if Foxglove was around her age, maybe a couple years younger. "He's responsible for thousands of dollars worth of damage to public property, not to mention the harm of dozens of people for the sake of helping them," Roth countered, pointing to the eyewitness account. When he was trying to aid a store owner in a robbery, he called upon Foxglove flowers from the ground. This cracked the linoleum tiles and also caused varying levels of skin irritation to those trying to escape from the robbers. Due to the chaos this caused, both criminals managed to escape before the police arrived at the scene. "When are we leaving?" Nathan asked, handing his copy back over to Roth. Even at his voice, Enos could feel his heart rate spike, and not for the reasons it used to. "Tonight," he answered smoothly. "Your goal is to arrest Foxglove and bring him back to headquarters." Enos bit back a scoff. "In here I was thinking you were going to have us kill him on sight," she presumed in her mind. It wasn't until Nathan cleared his throat and stood up did she realize she had projected her thoughts across their connection. With no other words for either of them, Enos stood and left the office, already trying to contemplate a plan. Waiting for the elevator, she heard Nathan's footsteps approach from behind her, his pulse beating with nerves. "Enos," he tried, voice shaky and tired. "We don't have to," she quickly said, finally turning to face him head-on. He looked exhausted, deep bags underneath his dull green eyes. His dark hair, usually somewhat well-kept, was disheveled and messy. His eyebrows pulled together in confusion as he opened his mouth to speak. "Don't have to talk about the mission or otherwise," she dismissed, lips pressed thin. Nathan barely nodded, eyes fixed ahead on the doors of the elevator that they were waiting on. She could feel a small tug within her mind, courtesy of Nathan, but she pretended not to notice. "I've missed you," he whispered out, almost like it caused him physical pain to confess such an idea. She couldn't help the sharp inhale of a breath. In a million words, Enos wanted to agree, argue, scream at him, or cry. "I'm taking the stairs," is all that she settled on, leaving Nathan to stand alone. Within her jacket, there were 3 things that rested in her pockets. The first item was the arm cuff that Roth had given to both her and Nathan on the day of the bonfire mission. She would have been content to bury the piece of technology and never touch it again, but she wasn't looking to face Roth's fury just yet. It still buzzed like electricity under her fingertips, a steady reminder of the power she possessed with them. The second collection of items were the rings that Charity gave to Bonfire. She had tried to offer them back to Clyde, their original creator, but he had refused them. She asked him about the initials, assuming that her original theory was wrong, and that the CK stood for Charity and not her father, but he had just laughed at her. "My wife was a firecracker of a woman, always wanting to go against the grain of what society thought was normal, so I took her last name when we married. Charity's death was hard on her mother, so I understood the divorce," he told Enos with a sad smile. At the time, she had offered her own sympathies to the older man, thinking about how it was odd to hear his full name, Clyde Carus. The last item had been the bird brooch that Clyde had gifted her when she returned from medical leave. She had no intentions on using it within the field, but she figured it was better safe than sorry to bring along. Grabbing each creation while she suited up, she waited for the rest of her team to join her in the lobby of the Federation's headquarters. A few workers shot her odd looks, ranging from confusion to disgust, but Enos paid them no mind at all, like usual. Outside, the protesters had significantly lessened since the announcement of the new vigilante laws. A few committed groups from the moor still shouted at anyone who would listen about how inhumane what they were doing to the vigilantes was, but no one seemed to pay them a second thought. She tracked Roth and Nathan's footsteps through the building, preparing herself to face them. She stood tall, eyes trailing their movements through the lobby. Roth walked in confident strides, with purpose, causing Nathan to ever so slightly lag behind him. As she was about to turn to exit the building, she could hear quick but quiet footsteps pound through the headquarters, getting closer to the lobby. "Eagle," Kaz called out, loud enough for the entire group could hear him. She stepped closer to him, confusion masked as she faced him. "I just wanted to wish you luck on your new assignment." "Thank you," she said in the same volume, focusing on Kaz's pulse that thundered away with a lie. She subtly leaned forward, knowing that her enhanced hearing would pick up on the words that the others wouldn't catch. "Clyde wanted you to know that there were a lot more bird files than he originally thought. He said you'll know what he meant when he said that someone named Charity was the cockatiel," he said in an even quieter whisper. Enos found no trouble in hearing him, forcing her body to remain relaxed instead of tensing like she wanted. If Charity had a bird file, that meant her death was a long, thought-out process. It wasn't a sudden decision just because she found out about the Federation's corruption. It hurt to hear the confusion in Kaz's voice as he talked about Charity. It was just another reminder that the new generation of vigilantes would be facing new challenges posed by the Federation alone, with no medic to rely on like Enos' generation did with Charity. "Please tell him that the Honeyguide thanks him," she replied in the same near-silent tone, offering a grim smile to the younger vigilante before turning to Nathan and Roth. She listened to Kaz leave, muttering to himself about the confusion he still had. She distantly hoped that Clyde would understand the warning she was trying to give him. "I'm the Honeyguide, and this is supposed to be my last mission. Ever." The sun was setting by the time they arrived in the moors. Roth had escorted the two of them to the scene of their stakeout in near silence, staring glances between them ever so often. Nathan shuffled each time his eyes landed on him, and Enos pretended not to notice. Soon after, the top hero left them with wishes of good luck. And then it was just Enos and Nathan. Neither of them made any move to speak, settling on the roof of the apartment building that overlooked most of the district. Enos leaned as far as she could off the edge, scanning the streets below for any signs of life. She kept her attention split, also listening to Nathan's movement behind her. It was an odd feeling, treating him like a threat. Except he was. Or at least she'd been assuming he was. There was a chance that it was a made-up in her head, and that Nathan was just as clueless as she was when she first agreed to become an ally with the Federation. Maybe the Honeyguide was a different mission, and maybe it had nothing to do with Enos at all. Or maybe it had everything to do with her. "They've finished up the plans to start rebuilding Carr's clinic," she commented, eyes trained on the scorched building in the distance. There was scaffolding covering half of it, as if to pretend that nothing ever happened there in the first place. "That's good," Nathan replied evenly. He joined her by the ledge, a distance between them. If it had been a few months back, maybe Enos would have felt the need to get closer. "Apparently there was a donation for new equipment too," she commented, desperate to fill the silence that threatened to consume them again. It was the first time the two of them had been alone together outside of the headquarters building, so Enos was straining for things to have some sort of resemblance of how they used to be. "That's useful," he reacted in the same monotonous voice, eyes on some point in the distance. "I was talking with one of the nurses when I was on leave. Can we not do this?" Nathan interrupted, finally turning to acknowledge that she was standing there. "Not do what exactly?" "This pointless small talk," he snapped, eyes burning with an unfamiliar fury. It was the type of look that would trigger fight-or-flight responses from criminals, a promise of pain if they continued. It was as vicious as a flame, as jagged as ice, and as unpleasant as the both of them combined. But Enos was neither guilty nor afraid. "If you had stood up to Roth when he was talking about the new laws, maybe I wouldn't have to resort to small talk," she shot back, arms crossed. She wasn't looking for a physical fight, but she was ready to defend her decision through and through. Nathan let a bitter smile grace his lips, shaking his head as he began to walk away towards the stairs that would lead into the building. "I'm not doing this right now. I'm going to look at the apartment Ross rented for us tonight," were the only parting words she got as he disappeared out of sight. She could hear him muttering to himself as he continued down the stairs, frustration unintentionally being pushed through their mental connection. Enos lost track of how long she stayed on the roof, simply admiring the moors. While she did believe that the distance made the heart grow fonder of many things, she knew that the moors would always be her home no matter what. As windows illuminated in the darkness of the night, she finally decided to head down to the apartment where Nathan had been hiding away. Her hands red with windburn and the chill, she could barely grasp the key to press into the old lock. She was greeted by the sight of Nathan sitting in the bay window, looking down at the streets. "Do you want first watch or second?" he asked coolly. Enos froze for a moment, different scenarios playing in her mind. Sleeping on first shift could be dangerous if she was correct about the Honeyguide file, leaving her vulnerable to all sorts of attacks. "I'll take first, you go sleep," she waved dismissively, shrugging off pieces of her suit to get more comfortable. In reality, it was the last thing that she wanted to do, already feeling vulnerable without the extra armor. In the back of her mind, she knew that Nathan would grow suspicious if she stayed battle-ready, so she knew if she was going to play it safe, she'd have to sacrifice the comfort of protection. At least her athletic underclothes would provide mobility. If she couldn't fight if the need arose, then at least she could run. She watched the hours tick past, listening through the walls of the apartment to make sure that Nathan was sound asleep before pulling out the bird brooch that Clyde had given her. Taking a deep breath to stabilize herself, she clipped it onto her shirt and closed her eyes. She shifted her focus all around the moors. She'd catch pieces of conversation between familiar vigilantes, at least the few who continued to go out even after the laws. She sifted through their voices like grains of salt, waiting to come across one that was unfamiliar to her. And like a snag, she did. Foxglove, jumping from roof to roof, would mutter to himself as he ran. The voice, young like she expected, seemed to be coming closer to the apartment complex. She recognized the clang of metal from a fire escape and the gentle thud of someone using a dumpster as a landing pad. It was an old trick, one that brought a nostalgic smile to her face. Double-checking the snores coming from the other room, Enos slipped out of the apartment, Clyde's 3 inventions pressed into her pockets. It took 10 minutes of walking at a brisk pace to finally track where Foxglove was. Almost as if he had sensed their presence in the apartment, he had changed directions, and swiftly. Enos found herself pushing the border of the district before she saw the same silhouette from the CCTV screenshot. In the same ripped pair of jeans, oversized hoodie and mask, Foxglove sat perched on an overhang to a storefront. "It's a little bit late to do some shopping," she teased lightly. Despite her best attempt at a friendly tone, Foxglove quickly jumped up from his relaxed position, eyes scanning widely around the streets until they locked onto Enos. "Eagle," he breathed out in awe. He jumped down onto the sidewalk, eyes wide in wonder as he approached her. She couldn't help the small smile that crept onto her face, finding comfort in the confirming that there was still at least one vigilante that liked her. "You should be careful about where you survey," she found herself correcting reflexively. "If the heroes see you out here, they'll arrest you." "Noted," he said with a chuckle. He scratched at the back of his neck, almost like an awkward teenager, as he shifted his weight from foot to foot. "That's why we're here, actually," she found herself cautioning. The vigilante froze, eyes now wide in something other than admiration. Now it was fear. "Look, I mean no harm," Foxglove quickly jumped in to explain. He stumbled a few steps away from where Enos stood, hand flexing in the moonlight as if he prepared to call on his abilities. "Wait, that's not how I meant it," she quickly recovered, raising her hands in surrender. "Nexus and I were assigned to the moors because you caught the attention of the Federation. They want us to arrest you, but I'm here to warn you." "Why?" Foxglove asked, not daring to take a step closer. "Because the Federation is putting the pieces into place to begin wiping out the vigilante population in the moors, and I cannot, will not, let that happen under my watch," she stated firmly. He looked at her for a moment, as if studying her features like a science experiment. "If you think the Federation is so bad, why are you still working with them? A lot of the others have been asking about you, you know," he questioned, as if he didn't break and heal Enos's heart all in one. "There needs to be someone on the inside," she put it simply with a shrug. "Why not Nexus?" he asked. Even at the innocent inquiry, she felt herself tense. "He can't be trusted anymore," she declared. Now that the words were out, available for any vigilante to hear, there was no way that Enos could reverse it now. If for some off chance she found herself wrong about Nathan, about the Honeyguide, about the Federation, she'd never be able to erase the reputation she had just given them. Deep down, she knew that she was right about it all, despite wishing more than anything that she wasn't. "Oh," Foxglove said, dejected. "I really looked up to him, you know? Like, the others were cool and all, but Nexus always seemed so collected, in control." With each word he spoke, the wild movements of his hands, Enos found herself growing concerned about one thing. "Remove your mask," she all but commanded. In any other case, a vigilante would be likely to protest or panic. While identities weren't as sacred as they once had been, many of the vigilantes in the moors had valued their mask as a part of their persona. There would be only two reasons for one to remove a mask on command. Either they knew the one requesting it well enough to trust them with their life, or they were incredibly young, like Foxglove, who couldn't have been older than 16 by his round cheeks and braces. Enos let out a string of swears for many reasons. She swore at the Federation for sending him to arrest a child who was fighting to make a difference in his home district. She cursed at the other vigilantes for not stopping someone so young from joining them in their dangerous hobby, regardless of if most of them started around this age. Most importantly, she swore at herself for not being in the moors often enough to prevent yet another kid from putting his life on the line because she decided playing hero was more important than helping the district. She never got to explain herself to the kid. His eyes lit up an unnatural green. Turning her head at the speed that would surely give her whiplash, she was met with Nexus standing a few feet behind her, standing in his green armor suit. Upon seeing her face, Nathan's brow furrowed. Concentration broken, his abilities' hold on Foxglove dissipated, allowing the kid to have control of his body once again. With his freedom, she could hear the pounding of his footsteps as he ran. "Nathan," she tried as he began to walk towards her. "He's getting away," he all but spat out, quickly moving past her. Before he could break into a full run, Enos reached out and grabbed his wrist, hard. "He is a child," she hissed, tugging Nexus so that he'd at least look at her. He did briefly, shaking his head and yanking his arm out of her grasp. He gave no retort as he made his way down the street, following the kid. With no choice but to follow, Enos could only hope that Foxglove knew better than to run somewhere personal like his house. She remembered the first years of being the Eagle, and everything that she had to learn after making stupid mistakes over and over again. With the cool air burning her face, the streetlights whipped past her as she ran in a steady rhythm. She focused her senses onto two heartbeats, Foxglove's, which was pounding in a rapid beat that were mixed with adrenaline and fear, and Nathan's. The rhythm that she had lived her life by, comforted herself with, now meant anything but safety it used to. The three of them found their way inside of the abandoned gym, one that was devoid of any equipment in life. Glass windows were shattered and dust danced in the air as Enos scanned the scene. Nexus stood in the middle of the room, eyes trained on Foxglove, who was now cornered by the back wall. Even in the dim light of the moon, Enos could see the dark stain on Foxglove's side growing, blood dripping through his fingers as he pressed on the newly acquired wound. "Under jurisdiction of the Valiant Federation, you are placed under arrest," Nexus began, his voice nothing like she remembered. The last time she had been on the field with Nathan, his voice was stern, but not completely void of emotion as it was now. His eyes had the same fury that they held earlier, pinning Foxglove where he stood. "He is a kid, Nathan," she interrupted, stepping closer to where he stood. The only reaction she picked up on was the minuscule twitch of his jaw. "Any use of your abilities, weapons, or resistance will result in further punishment decided by court," he recited, taking a step closer to where the young vigilante practically cowered in fear. "He didn't do anything," Enos said, running a hand through her hair as she felt frozen to where she stood. "If you turn yourself in now, there's a chance that your sentence can be reduced." "Nathan, shut up!" Nathan shouted, echoing off the walls of the empty gym. His eyes flashed through dangerous green as he turned to face her. He stared back at Enos, who could see in the broken shards of the shattered mirrors on the wall that her eyes were illuminated in the same way by his power. The base of her skull felt numb as she felt her tongue that felt like a dead weight in her mouth. In a quick decision, she determined that if she couldn't speak, she could still fight. She dove across the space between her and Nexus. A surprised yelp, the two of them tumbled to the ground. In Nexus's dazed moment, Enos rolled into a crouch and looked over to where Foxglove was still watching, still horrified. She only had time to wave him away before turning back to where Nexus had quickly recovered. His left pinky twitched slightly, giving away the punch before it got the chance to connect. He let out a noise of surprise as she dodged the hit, gaining enough momentum while leaning back to kick him in his chest. Despite the chest plate of his hero suit, he still sprawled backwards onto the ground. Nexus was never one to need much recovery time, standing to his full height to match Enos. They circled each other for a moment, gauging to see what the other was going to do, who was going to make the first move. It was Nexus who lunged, fist aimed straight for Enos' chest. She easily dodged the attempt hit, kicking back of Nexus' legs as she pranced to the other side of the room. Nexus, now on his knee, rolled out from the vulnerable position, eyes on fire as he charged at her again. The two met in the center of the room, neither holding back now. Nexus managed to twist one of Enos' arms behind her back, but she would have shouted in pain if his ability didn't still have a hold of her mind. A swift kick to the back of her knee sent her down to the floor, now out of his grasp. Falling forward, panting with exertion, she curled a hand to her pocket. Slipping on one of the rings from Bonfire was like being poured in cold water. First thing she felt was the relief of Nexus's hold on her voice dissipate. Like popping a lockjaw back into place, it felt like the alleviation of an uncomfortable pressure. The second thing she felt was any trace of Nexus in her mind. The bond that they established when they were children was now gone without a trace. Her head felt lighter in a way. It felt like spinning impossibly fast in winding circles, to come to a complete stop in a matter of seconds. Like a head rush, but not in the nauseating way. It felt like losing a weight that she had grown accustomed to. Nexus froze, also feeling himself be pushed from her mind. He stumbled back a few steps, as if she had physically hit him in their bra. With the short intermission, Enos rose to shaky feet, staring at her opponent. "You said we were helping the Moors," she panted out, voice croaking like she hadn't spoken in days. "We were," he retorted. "We are." Charging at her again, Enos quickly blocked his attempt at a hit, countering it with a punch of her own. She could practically feel the reverberation of his teeth as her fist hit upwards on his jaw. She noted the blood that was now steadily dripping from her split knuckles. Nexus stood, murder in his eyes as he faced her head-on. He took a step forward, causing Enos to tense and brace for the next series of punches that he was sure to be thrown. Midway through, he paused, tilting his head in a bird-like manner. "What the hell are you doing?" she found herself asking, as if they weren't just trying to kill each other mere moments ago. "Roth is asking us back to headquarters," he spat in disdain. As he turned his head to look into one of the shattered mirrors, Enos could see the calm in his ear. She slowly wondered who, if anyone at all, was on the other side and what they had heard. "Why? So you can both try to kill me there out of the public eye?" she scoffed, backing away a few steps as Nexus fixed his attention onto her again. "Let me rephrase. You and I are going back to the Federation, or I'll tell Roth that Kaz is planning on revealing sensitive information to the villains here in the Moors." Her stomach dropped at the mention of the vigilante. While she might not have known him for long, nor shared many conversations with him, she wasn't going to willingly put him into any more danger if she could help it. Nexus stood, unwavering, waiting for her to make her choice. It suddenly hit her what was happening. The Foxglove mission was no coincidence, and it certainly wasn't Roth's idea alone. Now that the assignment had once again been failed by the two of them, Foxglove no longer posing as a bait to incriminate the Eagle, the Federation would have to fall to whatever backup plan that they had. If there was one person who knew about Enos' weakness for young kids in the Moors, it was her partner. She's no longer looking at Nathan Cuddy. The man that she had loved, worked with, and confided in was buried in a suit of armor and corruption of the Federation that he had now helped make. He was no longer the kid she ran around with in the Moors, teaming up with to fight criminals in her teenage years. Staring back at her was Nexus, hero of the mine track. It was an odd feeling, stepping back to the Federation headquarters after everything that had just happened. Nathan hadn't looked in her direction as he immediately went to the stairs, presumably looking for Roth. Distantly, Enos knew that she should take note with whatever they were discussing, but an all-encompassing numbness spread through her body that she just couldn't seem to shake. She found herself into the common room, which was thankfully empty of any heroes or students lingering around. Walking to the table in the small kitchenette, she studied every little engraving done by those who had sat there. She rubbed her thumb over one engraving in the old wood, carefully studying the words that echoed in the back of her mind since she first read them. "It's lonely at the top." Charity wrote those the first week here at the Federation, back when we used to take breaks together, Clyde had said from behind her. With no energy left, not even to jump at his silent appearance, Enos all but collapsed into one of the chairs. "You were a scientist while she worked here?" she muttered out, already exhausted, filling in the story she knew with the new information. He nodded, taking an empty seat next to her. I think even when she first agreed to help the heroes, she already knew they weren't clean, so to speak. I remember her coming to me with her worries and how I brushed them off like they were just first date jitters, he continued on, almost wistfully. "There was no way you could have known. They hid it well," she offered, tracing the jagged carvings with her thumbnail. "Not well enough for it to fly under your radar," he offered with a bitter smile. "They don't call me the Eagle for nothing," she shot back with a small smile at the familiar phrase. The two of them sat in silence for a moment, simply enjoying the other's company while they could. She knew that she'd have to fill Clyde in on everything that had happened in the moors between her and Nexus, but she couldn't find the words. Her own mind was still reeling from the fight, the betrayal, and the confirmation of all of her worst fears. He seemed to understand, leaning back in the wooden chair and closing his eyes. "Kaz gave me your message before you left," he said after a pause, his voice more gentle than she had ever heard it. "I was able to get into the file called the Honeyguide." Sitting up abruptly, she focused on the older man intensely. His wrinkled face drew into a sad smile, offering out a printed copy of a file that she hadn't even had the energy to notice when he was carrying. The stack of paper was surprisingly thick, and she tried to bury the hollow feeling that came with the implication the Federation had that much information on her. "How'd you get access?" she found herself asking. "The tension between you and Nexus has become noticeable," he said after a moment. "I figured that if the heroes were brave enough to use Fergus against his best friend, then they certainly wouldn't be opposed using Nathan against you. I guessed at the password after that, and Dauntless let me in." "Why is it titled Section 2? She wondered aloud, running her shaky fingers over the printed text. Clyde sighed, brushing back his thinning white hair before replying. "From my understanding, this file functions similar to how they set up the Cuckoo Bird. The Honeyguide was a code name for you and your deeds as the Eagle. It also described a plan that took place before either of you even stepped foot into the Federation." "How so?" she questioned, already fearing the answer. The first section explains that Nathan's scholarship from the lottery was rigged, as they wanted to make sure they had a powerful mind track hero on their side. They also knew that there was no keeping Nexus under their thumb without also having you. His offer for you to become an ally with the Federation to help the Moors was completely organized by the heroes themselves. In hindsight, it all seems so obvious now. Well, back then, she was almost certain that Nathan didn't know anything that they were planning. It was no surprise that the Federation had alternative motives for bringing her into the organization. They both should have known that Roth was never going to bring in a bad-mouthing vigilante for the sake of a good reputation. Shaking her head, she turned her attention to the copy of the file that she held in her hands, and began to read the first entry that was dated back to the first training session that she had sat in on. The Honeyguide started with reforming the curriculum within the academy, focused on unpredictability and hand-to-hand combat. She explained that in real fights, the students should be prepared to face any number of track abilities, and shouldn't rely closely on their own abilities. Despite her outspoken distaste for the heroes of the Federation, she seems to find a soft spot for the students and the younger folks. Her fighting style reflects what one would expect of a Moors vigilante. It's sporadic and relies on speed, while strength isn't the direct focus. While she does refine her muscles, she uses her smaller frame against her larger opponents for an advantage. Enos found herself having to pause after completing the first entry. It was a cold realization at reading what was obviously Nathan's writing, revealing all of the little things he observed about her. Within the file, he chose to write down what he thought were her strengths and her weaknesses, all ready to hand over to the heroes. She could see where he got the idea to send her after Foxglove and use Kaz as a threat. Even back then, he realized the fondness to help the younger crowd. Skipping down a few, she spotted an entry written for the week right before she returned from medical leave. The Honeyguide has spent time in the moors for the typical recovery period offered for heroes of the Federation. While she's not posed an inconvenience for the organization so far, the Honeyguide has admitted to researching past vigilantes, along with their own connections to the Federation. See the cuckoo bird, and see the cockatiel. Clyde saw her a sympathetic smile as she muttered out a few swear words. She recalled calling Nathan out for writing something when she was on the phone with him on one final night of her leave. She remembered him fishing for information, dodging her questions about the supposed mission report that he was working on. He had been brave enough to collect information about her while he acted like he was her ally, her friend. In reality, she was just an assignment given to him from the Federation. He fought me on our assignment tonight, she confessed quietly, laying the copy of the file on the table. There were still a few entries from more recent dates, but Enos knew that if she continued to read about how Nathan betrayed her, she'd be sick. To kill you? He asked lightly. Enos shook her head, rubbing at her temples. While the fight was violent in nature, she knew that if Nathan wanted her dead, he knew how to. Deep down, a part of her hoped that he was withholding because he still cared about her, and that the life they spent together wasn't nothing in the end. Do you think Charity went through the same thing? She found herself asking, once again looking at the words carved into the table. I think too many vigilantes went through this, he replied, turning to face Enos head on. Kaz and I found dozens of other files under bird names. If the cuckoo bird was about Fergus and Keegan, the cockatiel was about Charity, and the Honeyguide was about you, then there's a pattern. Any of their files about birds will inevitably be vigilantes who end up dead by their hands. There are 4 students who currently attend the academy who were once vigilantes in the moors, she warned, remembering Kaz mentioning a parakeet as a code word he had overheard. I've been looking out for them, Clyde immediately calmed, practically reading her mind and thought process. She suppressed a flinch at that idea. Do you think there was ever a chance for us? She whispered weakly, adrenaline crashing as reality set in. There was no more Enos and Nathan, the dynamic duo of the moors. There was now only Eagle, the vigilante, and Nexus, the supposed hero. I think there would have been, if it hadn't been for Roth and the Federation, he answered, honestly, after a moment to think. Accepting the answer with a sharp nod, she stood, picking up the file once again. Thank you, she said earnestly. Nice rings, was his reply, pointing at them with a small smile. Immediately she reached to remove them, having forgotten about slipping them on in a moment of panic to prevent Nexus from predicting her moves. Do you want them back? She offered, knowing that they once belonged to his daughter, someone he'd never get the chance to see again. All because of the heroes. No, Clyde said, standing and giving her arm a squeeze. They couldn't save the first 3 vigilantes I promised to care for. Maybe they can save the 4th. Leaving, the janitor walked further into the Federation headquarters hallways, whistling the same tune he had when they had first met. It was the training room of all places did Enos face Nathan again. He was no longer wearing his green and black armored suit, exchanging them for a simple t-shirt and jeans. In bittersweet memory, she thought about the times where they just existed in each other's presence in the moors, dressed in nothing but their civilian clothing. As he turned to face her, she could see the development of a nasty bruise on his jaw. Her knuckles ached at the memory. I talked to Roth, he said calmly. His voice was restrained, not quite a whisper as he watched her walk deeper into the room. They were both waiting for a fight, but Enos wasn't looking for one. What did you tell him? She commanded, equally as quiet. That Foxglove retreated, and that you had conflicted emotions about the assignment, he explained. I didn't tell him about the fight, if that's what you're asking. That would have been the last thing I expected you to withhold, she shot back, feeling the spark of anger grow in her chest. It all seemed so pointless to her. She fell for the Federation's bait to choose a vigilante over them, which could have easily been used as a reason for her arrest. She couldn't understand why Nathan didn't confess that she fought him. In a violent swell of hatred, she held the file in her hands, the title in Nathan's clear sight. It was never meant to harm you, he tried to explain, but Enos held up a hand sharply to cut him off. Surprisingly, he let her. You knew that Roth erased Charity's reputation. The entire time, you knew that Keegan was right about Fergus and Roth, about the Federation. I didn't know the entire time. But you knew for long enough, she said, not wavering. He fell silent, accepting that she wasn't going to let him talk his way out of it. His silver tongue had and would always fail on one person, Enos Wake. "I'm giving you until tomorrow to explain what happened tonight to Roth," Nathan stated, arms clasped behind his back. His cold eyes and rigid demeanor were nothing short of what he'd do if he was Nexus, intimidating a criminal to gain information. Despite the new laws, Enos was no villain. "I'm not staying at the headquarters," she said with a disbelieving laugh. "If you return to the moors, the heroes will be looking to arrest you because of your vigilantism as Eagle," he explained simply. "If I stay, they'll kill me like they did with the rest of my kind." Neither of them moved, accepting what the other had said. Enos couldn't help but try to commit Nathan's features to memory. His dark hair pushed out of his face, his bright green eyes that were still unnatural even when his powers weren't active. She tried to recall the sound of his heart, a steady but true beat that she used to live by, and now a distant echo already fading from her mind. She'd never focus on it again, like how she'd never remove the rings on her hand and let him back into her mind. "When Roth orders for someone to come and kill me, could you at least do me the mercy of not volunteering for the task?" she asked, eyes wet and chest constricting. His silence was an answer in itself. She nodded to herself in bitter acceptance, meeting his eyes for the last time. For all she knew, the next time they laid eyes on one another, it would be on a battlefield or in a casket. She'd never stand with him, only against. "Goodbye, Nexus," Enos said, face schooled and eyes cold. Turning on her heel, she left Nexus standing on the mat, watching her leave. Flexing her hands into fist, Enos Wake stood atop of the scaffolding connected to the Karis clinic. The half-charred building offered one of the highest vantage points in the moors, becoming her main place to scout out trouble when she'd make an appearance as the Eagle. While she was still hesitant, afraid of seeming like a hypocrite for her time at the Federation, many of her former allies welcomed her back with open arms. It made sense, she supposed, that they needed to stick together now that the heroes were getting braver with their arrest on vigilantes. For the next couple of months she spent back in the moors, she made her stance very clear on what she thought about the Federation. Some nights, when even the normal criminals found the chill too unbearable, she'd wait by streetlights and storefronts, looking for armored bodies to try and stop her. If she was lucky, the hero would take the bait, speaking the same script about how they were going to arrest her for a lack of Federation-issued license, to which she'd grin under her gator mask, tempting fate as she raised her fists. Many of her fellow vigilantes had confided in her about their fears about the heroes completely wiping out their league. With citizens in the other districts becoming more complacent with the laws now that the months had passed, there were few that batted an eye when a new arrest was announced on the news. Enos told them not to worry, as she knew something that they didn't. In her research about the bird files, she looked into the actual animals. Cuckoo birds and honeyguides were what scientists considered brood parasites. They would lay their eggs in other birds' nests, allowing the parents to care for them like their very own. Once hatched, the babies would typically kill the actual eggs of the parents, ensuring a better survival rate for the species. If the heroes wanted to extinguish the vigilantes entirely, especially by taking their younger ones for their academy, then they'd have to deal with the consequences once they too realized what the Federation truly stood for. And if Enos fed this rule of survival to them, warning them about what it means to stand in the shadow of the heroes, the only one who would know would be her, and her alone.